The title of this is The Next Steps for Manufacturing in the 21st Century. And as we just heard, I think one of the really exciting things about what's going on here are how we're taking tools from the last century or even the early part of this century and using them in different ways rather than making pharmaceuticals or big commodity chemicals, extending those tools into a really different space. And I think that's one of the things I find really exciting about modern Meadow is like taking the tools, the science and engineering tools that we all use in our labs, but extending that into a really novel space. And what do you think about, how do you describe the space you're in to people who are maybe not so familiar with it?
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Yeah, we like to describe the technology we practice, this space that we're in, as biofabrication. And there's a lot of terms that encompass various parts of the broader industry that we're a part of. Cellular agriculture is one. Within a medical context, it's been regenerative medicine or tissue engineering. What we mean by biofabrication, it's a fairly broad term. It's an integration of biotechnology, material science. Really, it's biology meets engineering meets design, and the emphasis is not just on those components, but it's on the creation of a higher order kind of three-dimensional structure through the use of those tools. So cellular agriculture could be a part of it because it could certainly be important to make the ingredients that are inputs into biomanufacturing or biofabrication. But it's important for us in the making of leather to also be able to recapitulate the higher order structure of what makes leather leather, right? So leather is composed of collagen, but it's not just collagen in solution, it's collagen that's organized into fibrils and fibers and fiber bundles, and you recreate that tertiary structure that imparts a lot of the mechanical properties, the aesthetic properties that makes leather so desirable. So that's what we mean by biofabrication. It's the integration of all those fields, higher order structure, with an emphasis on design meets biology meets engineering.
Very cool. Yeah, you just talked about starting with tissue engineering or in the medical field. So you've seen quite an evolution from, for this technology from a medical application now to a more, a fashion or a leather application. What are your thoughts on that change or that evolution of the technology over the last few years?
Yeah, it's super interesting, and I'll put a version of that question to you as well. Yeah, I mean, my background comes from the business side, from tissue engineering applied to medical challenges. And with Organovo, we practiced a form of tissue engineering we call bioprinting, which is about being able to recreate the structural biology of human tissues, fully functional human tissues, that can achieve real native functionality. And initially, when we came up with this approach, we were seduced by the possibility that we would eventually create replacement organs, that you would 3D print a heart or liver or kidney that could address the organ shortage. And that is very much the direction that this technology can head in the future. However, we realized early on when we were starting Organovo that you need to walk before you run. So we applied these technologies to be able to create a more biologically accurate and predictive set of models to model human biology for the development and testing of new drugs. But what's interesting about tissue engineering and even industrial biology is that a lot of these new technologies are initially deployed in medicine, right? Because medicine is one of those fields where what's at stake is so incredibly dear, human life. So price is not an issue. I mean, what would you pay to be able to save a human life? What would you be able to pay to accelerate the development of a new drug? Especially when a new drug already costs over $1 billion, $1.5 billion to develop. So, so to be able to accelerate new drugs, you're talking about saving hundreds of millions of dollars. Same thing, I presume, with industrial biotech, where initially it was about being able to develop insulin, yeah, and metabolic enzymes for human medicine before that could be applied to other fields as well. Now let me turn the question to you. Yeah. So you came from Andras, and you've seen an evolution of of the focus areas in Andras as well.
Yep.
Some of it being medical, some of it being commodity chemicals, specialty chemicals, and now you're at Ripple. How do you see that journey, the evolution of these technologies, and what the focus areas have been? And how do you see technology and kind of the business focus playing together?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think early on at Andras, we concentrated on what were the big markets. You know, what can you use synthetic biology or metabolic engineering to address these really big global problems like biofuels. 2008, there was a lot of concern about the fuels and the cost of fuel, and it seemed like a really good play to take this technology and try to make commodity chemicals. That's a very difficult challenge, as we learned. Over time, you start realizing to get to that scale, the challenges to get your process economics just right, to get to that scale are really challenging. So during Amris's evolution of their business model, they started looking at other markets. Where are other things where you can use fermentation to make natural products? And their sweet spot wound up being places where there's a natural product that's out there that's really difficult to either get at a low price or at a stable price. If you're a business that's built on a natural product, you hate to see huge price fluctuations. So Andras's technology fit in really well in places like that, squalane being one of them. There's multiple sources of squalane in the world. Sharks are one of them. You can also get it as a side product from olive oil, but there were huge fluctuations in that price. And so our ability to go in and make a compound and keep the price very steady and the supply very consistent was very attractive to a lot of the companies in the world that use that as an ingredient. Going to Ripple, the thing I really find exciting about Ripple is we're now making a consumer product. So we've taken these tools of biotechnology, and rather than making a pharmaceutical or an ingredient that goes into another product, we're making it an actual consumer product. And as a scientist, I find that super exciting to be able to make something that touches people directly, that they can go out to a store and buy, that, I can explain it to my mom really easy what I'm doing because she can buy it in the store, and you have that much more direct impact on the world. And I think that's what's really, what I've seen, at least in my time in the industry, is as the cost or the barriers to get into this kind of technology, cellular agriculture or metabolic engineering, as those lower, it's really interesting to see them start to branch out in areas of the business world that have a much more direct contact with everyday people.
I fully identify with that, by the way, that idea that you're making a complete product. Because so much of this industry and so much of these technologies have been deployed to make ingredients that are very functional, that have a tremendous environmental benefit, but at the end of the day, they're not visible to the consumer. And yet we have an opportunity here. You're doing this with Ripple, we're doing it with Modern Meadow, where we're making a complete product. We're making a leather, for example, at Modern Meadow that brings new design and performance properties, and by the way, is a branded premium leather. Let me ask a question in this audience. How many of you are wearing leather? Or how many of you have bought a leather item in the last year? Raise your hands. Okay. Can anybody in the audience name a brand of leather material, of real leather material? Okay. We have a few up here. Isn't that amazing? We've got this $100 billion global raw material market, and there's no established, recognizable consumer brand for the material. And also, this global market is fragmented, it's inefficient, it's got a lot of hasn't been tremendous technological innovation in it in decades. And so we have this opportunity with these new technologies to not only deliver functional benefits, new design, new performance, but to also create a branded consumer experience behind this technology. And that's really a remarkable thing. And you're doing this with Ripple.
Yeah, it's a really exciting opportunity, and at Ripple, at least, we feel like the branding is as equally as important as the technology. We're a technology company, we're a food company. We use the technology to help build the brand, we use the brand to help sell the technology, and both sort of help to get the company the tools it needs to get to where we want to get to, the next steps with affecting products. I see we got a question down here about funding. I think, you guys just announced your Series B funding. That's a pretty exciting time for your company.
And you guys as well. Congratulations to us both.
Yeah. Now the easy part happens, where we just all make it happen. So, yeah, you know, what are your plans? You know, what are you guys going to do with this money?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we're really glad. I mean, it came together really well. We couldn't be happier with the investors that you know, that came together. We thought long and hard about what's the right mix, and it was important for us to be able to have investors that share our vision, that are patient, that are deep-pocketed investors. That this is not their last check. This is they can write more checks in the future. That are good to work with, that can add value beyond the dollars they bring. But as you guys all know, fundraising does not equal success. Fundraising is a necessary step. It's like arriving, like, you know, I tell this to our team, it's like after a long journey through the foothills, we've arrived at base camp, and we're thrilled that our supplies have also arrived, right? So now we've got supplies, we've got oxygen tanks, we've got climbing gear. Now we can really go up the mountain, right? But up the mountain we must go. So for us at Modern Meadow, there's a lot of, I mean, we have real clear line of sight on what we need to do. We're scaling, we're scaling beyond R&D. We're bringing online pilot production of our materials by the end of the year. Importantly, we're hiring. So we're 35 people. We've got an amazing multidisciplinary team of scientists and engineers and designers, and it's really a great mix. And we're looking to double that. So we're looking to be 60, 70 people within a year, yeah, it's accelerating the pace of our R&D and scaling up and growing the team. Those are the really important focus areas. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we're also a branded consumer company. So completing the brand architecture behind our materials so we can figure out what to name the baby is also a process that we're going through right now.
Yeah, it's a really cross-functional team you have to build because it is this branded opportunity. How do you approach hiring? How do you approach thinking about people when you build these very interdisciplinary or cross-functional teams?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually part of that decision is what informed our move to New York. So we started the company in Missouri and California. And when we closed our Series A financing in 2014, we moved the company to Brooklyn. And you don't often see that happening. You don't often see biotech companies moving from the Bay Area to Brooklyn. You know, that's not the flow of traffic yet. But the reason we did that, it was very important for us to be part of an ecosystem where, yes, there's great talent, and in the Northeast there's great technical talent, but there's great design and creative communities that you can readily tap into. And we're closer to our partners, our channel partners. So for us, we are making materials in collaboration with some leading brands. And for us to be able to work, very closely with our partners who traffic out of New York a lot, New York being a design center, was important. But in building the team, you asked the question, how do you assemble a team? It's incredibly important that we don't hire ourselves. We look for people that have spikes and that can integrate with other people, but those spikes are different than what other people have. We have to hire people who bring something else to the table. So a mistake I imagine that some people might make is that they strongly identify with people that have similar traits to themselves, and then they hire people similar to themselves because they recognize that background. But that's how you end up with groupthink. That's how you end up with, basically you're stacking donuts and the holes align. For us, it's very important that we have complementary skills. We have world-class designers working side by side with world-class scientists and engineers, et cetera. And that's what makes the magic happen. It's at that interface of disciplines where the magic happens.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You mentioned moving to Brooklyn, how important it was to be around that world there for what you were doing. It brings up an interesting thought. Like, how do you think about the traditional leather world? What has been their response as you have grown as a company and as a technology? How do you fit into that existing industry?
Yeah. What's really amazing is that the traditional leather industry is among the first to recognize the need for innovation. You'd initially think that this, new technologies like this would be threatening to the industry, but that's actually not the case. And if you think about it, if your best practices, if you're a tannery that practices your really good, chemistry and you run a really clean process, you have a huge dependency on raw material. And that raw material is, animals like cows or whatever that are grown in the field. They take years to grow, lots of care and feeding, lots of pollution, waste and whatnot, lots of water. Then they're transported to slaughter. Their hide is removed, the hair, flesh, and fat is removed from the hide. Then they go through some chemistry, and then those hides are transported halfway around the world, typically, to Asia or Latin America, to where many tanneries reside now, to finish the tanning process. And you have this huge supply chain dependency on raw material. And if there's droughts, if there's kind of a swing in the underlying commodity prices, or if there's a lot of, for some reason, if the animals are grown where there's a lot of, insect bites or, scarring or whatever, especially as you industrialize more animal production, where you concentrate animals more, it affects the quality of hides negatively. So you have this dependency on raw material, and the raw material is getting crappier in global markets. So if you're a tannery and all of a sudden you can have a source of alternative raw material that is fully biological hide without the hair, flesh, and fat, and it allows you to utilize your infrastructure, and you can apply your all your knowledge, the science and the art of tanning, it's actually, it can create value for you. So we are not working against the tanning industry. We're collaborating with the tanning industry. We're working with some of the best tanneries. Now, there's obviously those that practice poor practices. We don't work with them. But we work with some of the ones that practice really the best chemistries. We can actually significantly reduce the chemistry that's used in the process, because we skip those beam house operations where you remove hair, flesh, and fat. But it's important to be able to ride the rails that are already out there. And for all of the companies here, as you establish new technologies, you really want to think about what is the infrastructure out there that you can leverage, where you can drop into it, or you can leverage that capacity. And I'm sure the same goes, for you. You've seen that, right?
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, Ripple started with the idea, we knew what our first product would be, we knew what retail partners we were going to use, and we knew, in essence, how we were going to manufacture it. So we really spent a lot of time designing our product to fit in with sort of what was existing in the world. There's the companies out there that do the type of manufacturing that we needed to do. We designed our product to fit into that system. So we didn't come at it with a point of, we're disrupting the dairy world and we're going to change things up completely. We really had to figure out how to exist in that ecosystem and to get our product out there.
And importantly, like, if your innovation requires full stack, like if it requires you to be every part of the stack, you're taking on a huge challenge, right? If you need to be, upstream, downstream, you need to, then create the product, then you need to, also be your own channel. I mean, that's a lot, right? So focus on what you're best at, and then you can always figure out how you can broaden, your place in that value chain, but don't try to be every part of that value chain in the beginning, right? Yeah. You're taking on a huge challenge already as is.
Yeah, definitely. Don't try to reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. For Modern Meadow, does your technology fit in general in the existing manufacturing space, or are you guys going to have to innovate there as well?
We certainly have to do some. There's certainly parts of our process that are very innovative, but as a philosophy, we try to. We try to leverage existing knowledge and existing infrastructure. So one example, we just talked about, that we work with best-in-class tanneries. And there's certainly parts of our process that require us building out production facilities. So that is something that we're committed to doing. Making our materials is something that, there's parts of that process that only we can practice, and it's something that we spent a lot of time developing the know-how, and we're going to build up the infrastructure to practice that. And we're going to do that at pilot scale by the end of this year. We're doing it at lab scale now. We're going to do it at pilot scale by the end of this year, and then we're growing beyond that. But we're very collaborative as a company, and we recognize that when there's cell engineering to be done, we don't know everything in-house. We've got a great cell engineering team, but there's amazing know-how out there, and we're very collaborative. When there's scale-up to be done, there's parts of that we can practice in-house, but there's a lot of know-how out there. There's capacity out there. We don't need to build out all that capacity. Yeah. We can contract manufacture and collaborate there as well. And certainly, we're making the material. We're not making the end product. So we're collaborating with brands that have a reputation for knowing how to make amazing end products. And we're working with them to provide a new material that they can work with. So it's all about collaboration at every step of the way.
Yeah, definitely. What's your, there's a question here, how long before modern meadow leather is the same as animal products? How do you think about the business model and how you're going to deploy this new leather in the existing world? Are you going for high end? Are you going to what business model are you approaching that product development with?
It's a really good question, and I put the emphasis here not on the how long. I mean, we're definitely bringing products to market in the coming few years. Right? In the next 2-3 years, we're going to be launching products. But really, the emphasis I would put in this question is same as animal products. We're not looking to do the same. If all you're doing with all this great new technology is delivering perfect imitation, it's a missed opportunity. We need to deliver innovation. We need to deliver some benefit. And it's great that it can be an environmental benefit. That certainly is what really motivates us as a company, but that is not enough for it to be the headline. It has to be something more tangible to the consumer. So for us, for leather, we're delivering new design and performance possibilities for the material. So we're making leather that is clearly fully biological leather. It's got all the qualities that we like about leather, the feel of leather, but it's like no leather you've seen. It's got something different. It's got new aesthetic possibilities, new design possibilities, really high quality. Without the need to work around scars and insect bites and imperfections and all that. So it has to deliver some value. It has to deliver. It has to delight the consumer, and it has to deliver value to your manufacturing partners. It can't just be the same as. That's a low aspiration.
Yeah, totally agree. That's one thing I think we've really tried to focus on at Ripple is that product experience. We get asked all the time, does your product taste like dairy milk? No, we didn't try to make a dairy milk replacement. There's other people doing that, and that's a great thing to do, but we thought, how can we make plant proteins taste as delicious as possible and give the consumer the best experience that we can give them, and really let the company ride on that and not focus on the technology or where it's coming from or anything like that.
That's exactly right. And look, I mean, I think in the very first panel we had, the question was asked, how good are your products, right? And I think that panel is very eloquent about, people saying we have a passion for the product. This is something we're making for ourselves. We're making it for our families. Same thing here. You have to be the biggest fan of your product, and it has to delight you. To delight the consumer, and that's what we're aspiring to as well.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned, take a step back real quick on fundraising. One thing I think I forgot to ask you about, but you mentioned how you thought about your investors and how you chose those investors. We got a lot of young companies here that are going through this process. It might be useful to talk about how you thought about that process.
Yeah. It's a really interesting time, and it's a really interesting space, because depending on how you position yourself, you could be seen as a biotechnology company, you could be seen as a technology company, you could be seen as a consumer company, you could be seen as clean tech, you could be seen as green tech, you could be seen as a bunch of different things, right? And there's certainly an art to how you position yourself relative to what's in favor or out of favor at the moment. Yeah. But for us, a wise person once told me that there's 4 things that you really need to attend to when you're fundraising. One, select investors that communicate to the market something that is very aligned with you as a company, right? So if you are a biotech company, if you are a company that's about a consumer experience, then find investors that are credible in biotechnology and in consumer. And for us, we brought in this round, it's important for us to bring in great biotech investors. So we have Artis Ventures, who recently sold Stemcentrx to AbbVie for up to $10.2 billion. Pretty good outcome. They stepped up in a big way in this round. We have also other prominent biotech investors that came in as well. But also consumer. We have investors that really understand consumer, and Temasek is an investor that's really deep-pocketed. They understand consumer. They also understand biotech. Horizons as well. Iconic. They understand tech and consumer. So the investors you select says something about you as a company to market, 1. 2, it's not just about the money. It's about what else investors can bring to the table in terms of added value or insight. And of course, everyone says added value. We add value, we add value. But there's a real difference between investors that can add a lot of value and those investors that are just money. The worst, of course, is investors that destroy value. That exists too, unfortunately. But at the very least, do no harm, but ideally, get investors that can really add value, that can make introductions, that can provide real insight, that can bring resources to the table in terms of their networks. And then, 3, should be investors that this is not their last check. They can continue to step up and back you in future rounds. You should ideally be backed by deep-pocketed investors who are not, who will be able to at least do their proratas, but potentially, if they're very excited about you, be able to step up. And that's been the case for our investors in this round. Temasek is a $200 billion sovereign wealth fund. Iconic, really deep-pocketed investors, Horizons, Artis as well. So it's very important for us to know that this is going to be a journey, and we want patient investors who can continue to step up. Not that they're expected to lead future rounds, but they need to to be able to participate. And then finally, no assholes. That's just the rule. There's amazing investors out there who achieve really, really great returns by not necessarily being like the easiest people to work with. Unfortunately, that's not a rule. You don't have to be not nice to do well. And we're fortunate to have incredibly high-performing investors that are top-tier investors who are all really constructive, really positive, and play well with each other and play well with us. So those are the 4 principles I'd advise everyone to adhere to if you can in your fundraise.
Yeah, definitely. Ripple, we just finished our Series B right now. We see ourselves as a food and a technology company, and so we have focused building out our investor team along many of these same principles, I think. We've Khosla and Google Ventures to help on the tech side. We have Acre to help out on the consumer food side. And then we've also tried to pick out some mission-based funds that are really see themselves as funding a mission. And Prelude Ventures was one of our early backers, was there too for that. And I think we really, the no asshole rule is a really good one. I think we also want to pick investors that understand how long some of this stuff can take. Any kind of biotechnology project is going to be fairly slow, and it's going to go slower than you expect it to go, and it's going to come in fits and starts. There's not a nice steady growth and yield or anything like that. Nothing can happen for 2 years, and then you get the aha moment that unlocks your technology. So having investors that understand that cycle, I think, is really important.
Patient capital is very important. And in times, when the market is hot, there's a lot of capital out there, but you have to distinguish between those that, there are investors, especially that are used to more consumer or tech timeframes, that are a lot shorter, where you can have a couple weekend hackathons and launch a product, or hedge funds that tend to be in and out of the market. But I think your point could not be more emphasized, which is it's very important that the duration and the patience of your investors be aligned with the duration and time frame of your technology.
Yeah.
And it'll take longer than you think.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Sometimes.
Definitely. What do you see, with the Series B and the expansion of your company? Obviously, you're mission focused right now on leather. What does Modern Meadow look like in 10 years in your head?
Good question. Our focus at Modern Meadow is materials. We are a materials company. We're focused on creating world's first biofabricated leather. And that's a huge opportunity. And as a small company, we need to focus. There's a lot of versatility behind our technologies, and there's a lot of directions in which we can go. Historically, we've developed some really interesting technology around food, and we're really excited about that opportunity. And we've got, we're studying that space to decide how to best advance our technologies in the food space as well. But our focus at Modern Meadow proper is materials. And over the next decade, there's a lot we can do. Developing leather, various versions of leather, there's a lot of design and functional iterations of the material that we can develop, a lot of performance possibilities that we can explore, and a lot of verticals that we can go into, from fashion, luxury, sport, automotive, interiors, furniture, you name it. There's a lot of different directions we can go in. So I see really over the next decade as, in 10 years, we're going to be a company that has products on the market, that's manufacturing, that's at scale, so we'll be able to really produce at world scale.
Yep.
We'll have, hopefully, a recognized consumer brand for premium leather that'll be integrated into the products of some leading leather goods or consumer companies. Yeah, I mean, in 10 years, if we do right by that, if we do right by the opportunity in leather, I'd be incredibly satisfied.
Yeah.
And there's adjacencies that we can explore, but I think that within that time frame, the commercial possibility will be most fully realized in our material space.
Yeah. One of the things at Andras we experienced was not only did you have innovation in the lab with designing the cells and the screens, but also you really had to innovate on that scale-up piece. There was a lot of work that was a really difficult challenge there. So I saw that as sort of two really big hurdles they had to get over. Do you see this growth of Modern Meadow, is the manufacturing and the scale-up a really big bottleneck for you, or is there more risk, you think, in the technology development itself?
Yeah. We've evolved significantly the way we practice our technology. So what we do today is very different than what we did 3 years ago. I gave a TED talk in 2013 where we unveiled our very first samples of leather. That came out of an academic lab, essentially. And we were practicing a process then that took two months to make the material. And it was a very, it allowed us to make great material, but it had real kind of scale-up challenges that we would have to solve. The technology that we practice right now, where we can leverage proven technologies that work at world scale. So both in terms of upstream, downstream, making of our materials, working with the tanneries, in theory, at no point in our manufacturing process is there a kind of a deus ex machina that's needed, and then there'll be this magical box that we're going to create. So every single thing that we're doing right now can be practiced at scale, and the equipment exists, and the infrastructure exists, and we don't need to own it all.
Yeah, That's great. It's a great place to be. Yeah. Ripple really tried to position itself in the same place, I think, to focus on the existing manufacturing capabilities that are out there. It takes a lot of know-how to do that. We had to, really pull in a lot of know-how from the world to understand what the landscape looked like out there. Do you have similar people on your team that understand what the tannery and the leather processes look like and how to leverage that?
Yeah, we have we have great expertise both on the leather and tanning end. In fact, we have just a world-class leather chemist that we work with whose nickname is literally, I'm not kidding you here, Dr. Leather. So he is just one of the foremost leather chemists in the world, and he's working with us on our chemistry, and he really understands the industry. And then our chief technology officer, we were talking earlier, is a DuPont veteran. He's had just about every job there is at DuPont, involved in leading R&D teams on nanotechnology, on biomaterials and bioactives, all the way to putting products into plant, scaling up manufacturing, working with contract manufacturers, doing a lot of plant economics and plant management, and then ultimately being the right-hand guy to the chief science and technology officer at DuPont. And, like you, was a nuclear engineer in the Navy.
Yeah.
So apparently it seems to be a required background to be a great R&D leader. Let me put the question to you. How do you guys understand your end markets, and what was the insight that led you to approach your end markets and the dairy aisle the way that you guys are doing it? Because it's a decidedly different approach than what you practiced at Andras, right?
Yeah, we went into this thinking, let's build a great product and get revenue first and use that revenue as a way to innovate around this area. We see ourselves as a food company. We want to repurpose plant proteins from various crops that are out there and use those to reformulate or to make great foods. And we needed a way to get started on that. So we chose milk purposely because that was something we felt like we could achieve in a year. We understood what we needed to do, and we spent a lot of time talking to the people out there in the world about the various manufacturing sites that were available, what kind of unit operations they had in those manufacturing sites, down to the flow rates that went through those unit ops, a really engineering-heavy focus on what capabilities existed and how we could use that. We were a team of 10 people last year. We didn't have the resources to build a factory or a pilot plant, so we had to really use what was out there. In the good side of that, we were able to get a product out very quickly, and now we're in the situation where, we can get revenue coming in, and we can start to grow our technology in other areas and other areas in the food world.
Well, I tasted your products and, love it, and can't wait to see
great.
it,
It's great to hear.
pervade the dairy aisle.
Yeah, we will launch nationally at Target in about 10 days, so if you have a Target near you could try it out. Well, great. I thank everybody
you all very
for their
much.
time.